All right, so I'm going to talk about celiac disease, which is also known as celiac sprue. So I think it's pretty interesting. Um, it's kind of a buzzword for people who now want to diet. Everyone says they're gluten intolerant. If they were truly gluten intolerant, they would have a lot of really drastic symptomatology. Um, so most of the time, people are diagnosing themselves as gluten intolerant. What celiac disease actually is a autoimmune reaction to gluten that then damages the villi in the small intestine. So the villi are the things, the little fingers that are along the mucosa in the small intestine, and they do all of the absorption of nutrients. And you can see from the little picture I've included here that A is normal intestinal villi. B is the beginnings of developing some immune-mediated swelling. C, we're starting to see the villi literally have inflammatory changes because of the swelling. So you can see the redness in the stain. That's the inflammation. And then it erodes the villi over time and basically swells them up into a big globular mass that no longer resemble fingers, and kind of now it's just a blob. And it can't adequately absorb nutrients because there's no surface area. It's just one big surface, and we need lots and lots and lots of little surfaces to be able to absorb appropriately. In 1888, a doctor named Dr. G-E-E, in London was noticing short stature, dental issues, malnutrition, wasted appearance, and an overall just kind of gassy, bloated, foul stool, sometimes bloody stool in children under the age of 5. So, and typically from lower socioeconomic class. So they started noticing a trend and they began investigating it. So that was in 1888. Fast forward 20, 40 years, and now it's 1918, and some of the physicians who have been looking at it all these years have now started realizing that it's related to the diet, but they still don't know what changes they need to make. They just know that bread consumption makes it worse. And bread was a very important staple in those times. Well, it still is, but even more so then because you were rarely likely to get meats or vegetables. So carbohydrates and starches tend to be what you lived off of. So these kids were kind of suffering because that's the only available thing they had. In 1924, in Australia, a physician finally put some kids that had all of the symptomatology on a banana-only diet. I'm not sure why they chose bananas, but they did. And all of their symptoms improved and almost completely went away. They still did not know that it was related to the wheat. So it wasn't until 1953. So we went from 1888 all the way to 1953 before somebody finally figured out that it was gluten from the processing of wheat products that was causing the inflammatory response in the immune system. These are the risk factors for celiac disease. Being of European descent, having a family history of celiac disease, having another autoimmune disease like type 1 diabetes. There are also other conditions that we see, congenital links with gluten insensitivity, such as Down syndrome and Turner syndrome. They have a very high number of celiac patients. We also see this more frequently in a Caucasian female. Females are diagnosed with celiac disease 3 times more than males. These are some of the cues. So the kids are going to present with diarrhea, steatorrhea, which is the foul, fatty, frothy, globular stools. They can also have constipation intermittently. We'll see abdominal distension and bloating. And then the rest of them, besides the nutritional deficiencies, are considered extra abdominal symptoms. So having irritability, lethargy, dental problems, anemia, a delayed onset of puberty or after puberty has started, then developing a complete amenorrhea. These are all common cues that we will see in a child or a teenager with celiac disease. So the management of celiac disease is the strict avoidance of gluten-containing foods. If you have a teenager come in or a child come in and they are wasted, they have electrolyte imbalances, they are lethargic and irritable and having a lot of gastric issues plus the bloating, we're going to try to give them some sense of nutritional health. So they might be placed on some TPN for a little while to try to give them some gut rest before we can start doing dietary changes. They're likely going to need IV fluids. They might need some interdisciplinary consults such as nutrition and a GI specialist. So our interventions for our celiac disease kids needs to be emotional support. It's really hard to just not feel good every day and to look like you are wasting away and feel like you're wasting away and not be in a bad mood. Again, we're going to have dietary and nutritionist consults, and we're going to have to provide a lot of education to family members about why it's so important to completely avoid gluten. Here are some of the foods that they need to avoid. So they need to avoid wheat and all wheat products. They need to avoid rye. This is called triticale. We don't see it a whole lot. Barley, gram flour, semolina, beer, ales, lagers, and any malt, including malt vinegar. They also want to make sure that whatever tools and kitchen products that are used to cook their foods are not cross-contaminated from having already touched the gluten, because if they've gone on a completely strict gluten avoidance diet and then there's the littlest bit of it, their gut's going to kind of overreact to that. And then there's hidden glutens in emulsifiers and seasonings, in potato chips, in all processed meats, in French fries, in bouillon cubes, canned soup, sauces, and dressings. So, oh my goodness, find a product that it's not in. And then these are the references. It's actually a really interesting article if you want to go to it and read about it. But yeah, gluten.